All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review, where we're going through our latest set of RBT exam practice questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. If you're looking for our proven study materials, check out btexamreview.com. We offer practice exam study guides and, of course, our famous combo pack. When you pass, please let us know so we can include you in our Sunday shout out. Other than that, let's work hard, study hard, get to our questions. Question 1. Jason frequently rolls around on the ground for several minutes at a time. He will do this around other people, but will also do it when he is alone in his room with all of his toys and with no one around. What would you hypothesize is the function of this behavior? If you get a question on the exam asking you to hypothesize what the function of a behavior is, it's essentially asking you, the RBT, to predict why is the behavior occurring. Because in practice, as the RBT, when new behaviors occur, you want to be able to, in the moment, predict why did it happen. And the function is simply saying the behavior happened because. So what you need to do is look at things like antecedents and consequences and make a determination that way. So what do we know about this behavior? Well, we know he frequently rolls around for several minutes. He does this around other people, but he also does it alone with all of his toys and with no one around. So when behavior happens around other people, right, it can be tangible, it can be attention, it can be escape. But if the behavior is occurring with nobody else around and no one else to mediate reinforcement, that's often a good indicator that it could have a sensory and automatic component. So what will we hypothesize is the function of the behavior? A, tangible. Well, if the behavior happens when he has access to all of his toys, it's unlikely he's doing it to gain more access. B, attention. Attention maybe, except he does it when he's alone and with no one else around to give him attention. So the behavior is occurring with no attention available. C, escape. He doesn't appear to be escaping from anything in this scenario because he's just alone in his room, also around other people. So there's no escape attempt given the information from the question. So likely it's a sensory / an automatic behavior. And remember, sensory and automatic mean the same thing. Automatic is a technical term. These days, sensory is now used interchangeably with automatic. All sensory and automatic means in terms of function is it's not socially mediated. It happens alone. It happens independently of another party. So our answer here is, what would you hypothesize is the function of the behavior? Well, D, sensory, automatic. Your 8-month-old daughter just learned how to clap. Now she claps throughout the day. Yesterday, she clapped 58 times in 8 hours. What was the average rate of clapping? Okay, we're looking for an average rate question. So how do we find rate? And anytime you get a rate question, that's what you have to ask yourself. What is that ratio we're looking for? Well, rate is simply frequency with a time component. So to find rate, you just put your frequency over your time. In this case, our frequency is what? Well, she clapped 58 times, so our frequency is 58, and our time is 8 hours. So our rate is technically 58 times in 8 hours. Now, if we want to find an average, we can just divide our frequency, 58, divided by 8, and we'll get 7.25. So our average is going to come out to 7.25 times per hour. So on average, she clapped 7.25 times per hour. 58, A, is just a frequency. C, 58 times per hour, is not the correct rate. 58 times in 8 hours is the correct weight. And we can determine it, right? We simply just divide our total frequency by our total time, and we're going to find our average, which is, again, 7.25 times per hour. If you don't know how to find averages and you don't know how to find totals, that's something you just need to learn, right? It's very simple math, but it's something you need to know for not only the exam, but also working as a technician. A boy just learned how to write his name using a pencil, but he grabs the pencil with his entire hand. His dad is teaching him how to properly grip the pencil. The dad is changing what aspect of behavior? I love this example when we're teaching topography and function and magnitude because it's very clear and easy to understand. A lot of kids, when they first start writing, they'll grab the pencil with their full fist and then write. So if they're writing their name, they'll grab the pencil with a full fist and write their name. So the function is correct because they are successfully writing their name. What we want to do now, though, is change how it looks. So instead of grabbing it with a full fist, we're going to now use a pencil grip. So we're not changing the function. The function stays the same. The function of writing, right, is still functionally meeting the need of writing the name. We're just going to change how it looks now. Magnitude would be if the boy was maybe writing too light or too dark, we would want to adjust that. So understand the difference between those three, right? Function is what the behavior is producing or what it's getting rid of. It's the reason it's occurring. Topography is what does it look like? And then magnitude is like the intensity. It's hard, it's soft, it's loud, it's quiet. In this case, the boy is writing his name, so the function is correct, but he's grabbing it with his entire hand. We want him to grip the pencil. So what is the dad changing? Well, he's just changing the topography. He's just changing the way it looks. It's still serving the same exact function. The magnitude isn't changing. All that's okay. It's just how it looks. So if you ever get confused with topography, function, and magnitude, think about this example. The boy's writing his name, the function is being met, but instead of using his full hand, we want a grip. That's the topography. And if we wanted the boy to write a little softer, we'd be changing magnitude. I think it's a great example of all three of these aspects of behavior. So think this through, make sure you understand the difference between topography, function, and magnitude. It's very important. In this case, the data is changing what aspect? Well, A, topography. You are shopping at the mall with your little brother and sister. You tell them you will buy them each one toy as long as they ask appropriately for it. If they cry for the toy, they do not get the toy. What differential reinforcement procedure does this most resemble? Differential reinforcement. It's one of our terms, one of our vocabulary words. We're reinforcing one behavior, putting other behaviors on extinction. As RBTs, we need to specifically know DROs, DRAs, and DRIs. DRO is simply other behavior, so you're reinforcing the absence. DRA is alternative, so the behavior can occur together. DRI is incompatible. The two behaviors can't occur at the same time. In this case, what is the behavior you want to teach? Well, you want them to teach to ask appropriately for it. That's the behavior you're going to be reinforcing. The behavior on extinction is what? Well, crying for the toy. So you have to ask yourself, can crying and asking appropriately occur at the same time? It can, right? They can be crying and asking appropriately at the same time. So these aren't incompatible, but they are alternative. So what differential reinforcement procedure are you using? A, DRO. Well, DRO, we're picking a target and then reinforcing in the absence of that behavior. We're not doing that here, okay? DRO doesn't teach a replacement. That's one of your keys. We are teaching a replacement, so we can't be using DRO. Are we using a DRA? Well, yes, because asking appropriately is an alternative for crying. It's not incompatible, but it is an alternative. C, DRI is just like DRA, except you're teaching incompatible behaviors with C. And then D is the differential reinforcement of lower rates of behavior, where we're trying to decrease how often a behavior is occurring. In this case, we're teaching a brand new behavior that is an alternative for crying. So what differential reinforcement procedure does it resemble? Well, B, a DRA. It is the first week of the new year after the holiday break. Your supervisor joins you at the client's house and sits and talks with the client's parents for almost 45 minutes. What type of data was the supervisor most likely taking? All right, what type of data? That is the question we're focused on here. So let's think through different types of data, okay? We have indirect data, we have direct data, we have baseline data, we can take maintenance data, we can take functional analysis data, preference data. We have all this different type of data we can take, all right? So you really have to narrow it down to what is occurring in the scenario. We're talking about the supervisor here, and the supervisor is at the client's house, but they're talking with the parent. They're not necessarily observing the client. So when you're taking data, but you're not observing the client, instead you're talking with the parent, you're conducting an interview, or you're conducting a survey or whatever it might be, that's not direct data. Direct data is directly observing the client. If you aren't directly observing the client, you're taking indirect data. So in this case, the supervisor is most likely taking A, indirect data. Do we pick A and move on? No, let's again read all of our answer choices and determine why they're incorrect. Well, we went over B, direct. Well, we're not observing the client. The supervisor isn't observing the client. It can't be direct data. C, functional analysis. A functional analysis occurs actually manipulating things in the client's environment, working with the client. Supervisor is simply conducting an interview, okay? One of the lowest forms of the assessment. And then D, baseline. Baseline data requires observation of the client. So technically, functional analysis data and baseline data are actually direct data, okay? So B, C, and D are all direct, and we're not taking direct because we're not observing the client. We're interviewing the parent. So what type of data was the supervisor most likely taking? Well, indirect data. When using a least to most prompting procedure, what should be the first step? What is a least to most prompting procedure? If they give you a term in the question, you want to define that term first. So if we're using least to most, we are trying to evoke the behavior without using prompting or using as little prompting as possible. Most to least is the opposite, right? We would start with a full physical errorless procedure. We're not doing that here. We're using a least to most. And they want to know, what is our first step in using this least to most procedure? A, use a gestural prompt. Well, gestural prompts are low invasive, right? They are low on the hierarchy, but it won't be the first step. B and C, a visual or a verbal prompt. Again, those are very, very uninvasive, invasive prompts, right? So they are used, at the beginning of a least to most prompting procedure, but our very first step in the least to most prompting procedure is D. We want to let the learner attempt the skill first without a prompt. And a lot of people forget this, right? We use a least to most procedure and we immediately start prompting. In a least to most procedure, we want to give them the chance to attempt the skill without a prompt, because our hope is we won't need to introduce a prompt. Now, if we do D, they attempt the skill and we still need a prompt, then we'll go to something like a verbal prompt or a gestural prompt. But before we ever get there, our first step is going to be letting the learner attempt the skill first without a prompt. Southwest Airlines suddenly canceled thousands of flights the day after Christmas. How were the number of flights canceled tracked? So my flight actually got canceled, so I apologize for the audio. But if we're tracking how many flights got canceled from Southwest Airlines, what would be the simplest way to track that? Because you always want to pick the simplest way where you'll get the best data. So if we just want to figure out, we know they canceled a bunch of flights, how many? What's the easiest way to track that? A, using rate data. Well, rate data might give us some information about how many flights are canceled per day or per hour. We just want to know how many flights were canceled, simply put, right? Remember, rate is frequency, but it also has a time. In this situation, we just want the number of flights. We don't need the time. We just want the frequency. So B, using frequency data, would meet our need much better. C, using latency data, is going to involve time in between, right? Time in between the SD and a response. We're not looking at time here. We're looking at just the count. Same with D, using RBT data is time in between. We're not looking at time in between. We're not looking at time. We just want how many, just the count. And so this is a good example of when you need to answer the question in front of you. The question is just said, how are the number of flights canceled tracked, right? They just want the number. They don't want anything else. So give them that. How do we get a count? Well, we use B, frequency data. Two sisters are arguing over who gets to play with the baby doll. They both start crying and pulling on the doll. The mom walks over, takes the baby doll and says, okay, now nobody gets to play with it. The mom is attempting what? Okay, this is a reinforcement punishment question. When we get reinforcement punishment questions, we have two things we need to do. We need to figure out, is it positive or negative? And then is it punishment or reinforcement? Well, we know positive and negative, we need to figure out something added or taken away. So in this scenario, what happens? Well, the consequence is the doll is taken away. So it's removed from the situation. The stimulus is removed. It's going to be negative. Remember, that's all positive and negative means. Positive is added, negative is removed. So we know it's negative. Now, let's ask ourselves, by doing this, by the removal, are we trying to reduce behavior in the future or increase behavior in the future? Well, clearly, we're trying to reduce behavior in the future. And now we know we only determine if something is reinforcing or punishing based on future behavior. But if that information isn't given, then we need to do our best to determine what are we trying to accomplish. We're clearly trying to accomplish the arguing or reducing the arguing behavior by removing something. So if we're trying to remove something to reduce a behavior, Is that positive or negative reinforcement? Well, no, because we're trying to reduce. So is it positive punishment? Well, no, because we're removing something. So it has to be D, negative punishment. We're removing something in order to decrease behavior. So what is the mom attempting? Well, D, negative punishment. Fantastic. Thank you for watching. We apologize for the audio on this video. Next week, we'll be back to normal. Please like and subscribe. Let us know when you pass your exam so we can include you in our Sunday shout out. Other than that, let's keep working hard, keep studying hard, and I will see you soon.